The stars hung cold and distant in the void, as the Galactic Dominion's 6th Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. 300 warships materialized at the edge of what humans called the Terran exclusion zone. Each vessel bristled with weapons, their hulls painted in the crimson and gold of the empire that had conquered 400 star systems across the galaxy. High Commander Ralvin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory, and gazed at the star charts before him. For 3 decades, the Dominion had watched this isolated pocket of space with growing curiosity and annoyance. The humans had appeared on the galactic stage 50 years ago, established their borders, and then vanished behind their defensive line. Every probe sent into their territory disappeared without a trace. Every diplomatic overture was met with the same response: "Stay out." Emperor Vakthar had finally grown tired of waiting. The message was simple and absolute. Humanity would submit to Dominion rule, open their borders, share their technology, and integrate into the Empire. Refusal meant war. Ralvin personally thought this would be a quick campaign. His scouts reported only 12 human vessels guarding this entire sector, 12 ships against 300. The outcome seemed inevitable. On the far side of the border, Admiral Doyen Kim sat in the command center of Defense Station Bastion 7. He was a lean man with gray threading through his dark hair, and his eyes carried the weight of decades spent protecting humanity's frontier. Around him, holographic displays showed every movement of the Dominion fleet. They had been tracking the Imperial ships for 3 days, ever since they entered detection range. Captain Minji Park stood beside him, her arms crossed as she studied the enemy formation. She commanded the TDF Indomitable, humanity's flagship and the pride of Terran Defense Force. The ship hung in space nearby, its angular hull painted matte black to blend with the void. Unlike the ornate and massive Dominion vessels, human ships were sleek and efficient, built for function rather than intimidation. "They sent a lot of ships," Minji said quietly. Doyen nodded without taking his eyes from the displays. "They want to make a statement. They think numbers will frighten us into surrender. Should we send another warning? We've sent 3 already." They ignored all of them. Doyen's voice was calm, almost sad. "Some lessons can only be learned the hard way." Light years away in the Imperial capital, Emperor Vakthar reclined on his throne and watched the live feed from the fleet. Hundreds of courtiers and military officials surrounded him, all eager to witness the expansion of the empire. The Emperor was an imposing figure, his scaled skin gleaming under the palace lights, his 4 arms gesturing as he spoke. "Look at them," he said with amusement, hiding behind their invisible wall like frightened children. "When this day ends, humanity will kneel before the Dominion like every other species." Lord Krevnak, the War Minister, bowed deeply. "The 6th Fleet reports ready to cross the border on your command, Divine Emperor." "High Commander Ralvin awaits only your word." Vakthar smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Then let us not keep him waiting. Order the fleet to advance. Bring me Earth's surrender before sunset." Back at the border, proximity alarms began sounding throughout the Dominion fleet. Ralvin straightened in his command chair as sensor operators called out reports. The human ships were moving. All 12 of them broke formation and began advancing toward the Imperial line. "They're attacking?" Ralvin said with genuine surprise. 12 ships against 300? His tactical officer shook his head. "No, sir, they're not attacking. They're positioning themselves, spreading out across our approach vector." Ralvin watched the display, confusion mixing with contempt. The humans were placing their ships directly in the path of his fleet, but making no aggressive moves. They were just sitting there, waiting. It made no strategic sense. Then the communication came. Every ship in the Dominion fleet received it simultaneously, broadcast on all frequencies. The image showed a human male in a simple gray uniform. His face was weathered but calm, his dark eyes steady as he spoke. "I am Admiral Doyen Kim of Terran Defense Command. This is your final warning. Turn your fleet around and leave this border. You have no idea what you're approaching. There will be no further chances. Turn back now." The transmission ended. Silence fell across the Eternal Victory's bridge. Then someone laughed. Soon others joined in. The idea that these isolated primitives would threaten the might of the Galactic Dominion was absurd. Ralvin allowed himself a small smile. "Send a response. Tell them they have 1 hour to power down their vessels and prepare to be boarded. If they refuse, we will destroy them and proceed into their territory." The human response came back in less than a minute. Just 2 words. You were warned. Ambassador Sora Han stood in the diplomatic wing of Terran Command, watching the situation unfold with a heavy heart. She had spent the last 5 years trying to prevent this exact scenario. She had sent countless messages to the Dominion, explaining that humanity wanted only to be left alone. She had warned them that crossing the border would be catastrophic. But pride and arrogance had deaf ears. "We tried," said Counselor Unikang beside her. The civilian leader of the Terran government looked tired. "History will show we gave them every opportunity for peace." "History won't matter if this escalates into a full war," Sora replied. Yuna shook her head. "It won't escalate. This will be over before it truly begins. They'll learn today or they'll never learn at all." Aboard the Indomitable, Lieutenant Jiwan Choi ran final checks on the weapons systems. The young officer had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, training in simulators and running endless drills. But now that it was real, she felt remarkably calm. The hours of preparation had given her confidence. "All weapons ready," she reported to Captain Minji. "Point defense grids online. Railguns charged. Targeting solutions locked." "Good," Minji replied. "Remember your training. Fire only on designated targets. We're here to defend, not massacre." "Understood, Captain." In the command center, Doyen watched the countdown timer. In 15 minutes, the Dominion fleet would cross the border. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this. Humanity had isolated itself specifically to avoid conflicts like this one. They had learned from their own bloody history that sometimes the best way to prevent war was to be so prepared for it that no one would dare start one. But the galaxy hadn't gotten that message. The Dominion saw human isolation as weakness rather than wisdom. They saw the small number of visible ships and assumed humanity was vulnerable. They had no idea that those 12 vessels were decoys, automated drones designed to do exactly what they were doing now, drawing the enemy in. 40 actual warships hung invisible in the darkness, their stealth systems rendering them completely undetectable to Dominion sensors. Each one was commanded by experienced officers and crewed by men and women who knew exactly what was about to happen. The timer reached 0. The Dominion fleet began moving forward in perfect formation, 300 warships advancing like a wall of steel and fire. They crossed the invisible line that marked the Terran exclusion zone, and the universe held its breath. Doyen picked up his communication device and spoke one word to all ships. "Execute." The 12 decoy vessels vanished from Dominion sensors instantly. Confusion rippled through the Imperial fleet. Then, like ghosts materializing from nothing, 40 human warships decloaked simultaneously, surrounding the Dominion formation in a carefully prepared trap. The battle for humanity's border was about to begin. The moment the human decoys disappeared, chaos erupted across the Dominion fleet. Sensor operators stared at their displays in disbelief, calling out confused reports to their commanders. One moment the enemy had been right there, clearly visible on every screen. The next moment nothing. Empty space where 12 ships should have been. High Commander Ralvin gripped the arms of his command chair, his 4 fingers digging into the metal. "What happened? Where did they go?" His chief sensor officer's voice was uncertain. "I don't know, sir. They just vanished. All 12 ships disappeared simultaneously from all our tracking systems." "Ships don't just disappear," Ralvin snapped. "Find them. Scan the entire sector." But before the scan could complete, every alarm on the Eternal Victory began screaming at once. The tactical display lit up with red warning symbols, dozens of them appearing around the Dominion formation. The sensor officer's face went pale as he read the data. "Contact. Multiple contacts. We have 40 enemy vessels surrounding our position." "They're everywhere, sir." Ralvin stared at the display. The red markers formed a perfect sphere around his fleet, each one representing a human warship. They had appeared from nothing, materializing like demons from the void. His 300 ships were suddenly trapped inside a bubble of enemy vessels. How did they hide? Ralvin demanded. "Our sensors sweep everything within 1,000 kilometers. No one had an answer. The truth was simple but terrifying. Human stealth technology was so far beyond Dominion science that they might as well have been using magic. For years, Terran engineers had perfected systems that bent electromagnetic radiation around their ships, making them completely invisible to conventional sensors. The Dominion was scanning the right locations, but the humans were simply impossible to detect. Captain Minji stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching her tactical display with satisfaction. The trap had worked perfectly. Every human ship was in position, every weapon system ready. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their training evident in every movement. "Distance to nearest enemy vessel?" she asked. Lieutenant G1 checked her console. 800 kilometers. They're holding formation but showing confusion. Their communication channels are flooded with chatter. Good. Let them be confused. "Admiral Doyen, we're in position." From Defense Station Bastion 7, Doyen's voice came through calm and measured. "All ships hold position. Weapons free but hold fire. Let's give them one more chance." The communication went out on all frequencies, broadcasting to every ship in the Dominion fleet. Doyen's face appeared on their screens again, but this time his expression was harder, colder. "High Commander Ralvin, you have crossed into Terran space without permission. You are now surrounded by 40 warships, each one capable of destroying your entire fleet. I am giving you one final opportunity. Order your ships to retreat immediately. Power down your weapons and withdraw beyond the border. You have 5 minutes to comply." Aboard the Eternal Victory, Ralvin felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of military service. Genuine fear. He looked at the tactical display, seeing how perfectly positioned the human ships were. Every angle of approach was covered. Every escape route was blocked. His fleet was sitting in a kill box and he had led them right into it. But pride is a powerful force, especially in military commanders who have never known defeat. Ralvin thought about Emperor Vakthar watching from the capital. He thought about the hundreds of courtiers and officials witnessing this moment. The idea of retreat, of admitting these humans had outmaneuvered him, was unbearable. "We outnumbered them 7-1, he said, trying to convince himself as much as his crew. "Even if their ships are more advanced, we have the advantage of numbers. All ships combat formation, charge weapons. Prepare to engage the enemy." On Defense Station Bastion 7, Engineer Hunwoo Lee watched the Dominion fleet's power signatures spike as they prepared for battle. He shook his head sadly and activated the station's defensive systems. Massive railgun turrets emerged from concealed ports along the station's hull. Point defense lasers came online, their targeting computers already calculating firing solutions. "They're really going to do it," Hyunwoo said to his assistant. "They're actually going to fight." "Then they're fools," his assistant replied. Hyunwoo couldn't argue with that assessment. He had helped design many of the weapon systems the Terran Defense Force used. He knew exactly what was about to happen to those Dominion ships. It wouldn't be a battle. It would be a demonstration of the gap between their technologies. The 5 minutes passed. Ralvin gave no order to retreat. Instead, he raised his hand and gave the command that would doom his fleet. All ships opened fire. 300 Dominion warships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. Plasma cannons spat bolts of superheated gas. Missile tubes launched swarms of warheads. Energy beams lanced through space, turning the void into a light show of destruction. Thousands of projectiles and energy blasts converged on the human ships from every direction. On the Indomitable, Ji-Won watched her console as the point defense systems activated automatically. Computer systems calculated trajectories faster than any organic mind could process. Lasers flashed, intercepting incoming missiles with perfect accuracy. Railgun turrets spun and fired, creating a wall of metal between the ship and the plasma bolts. Advanced shielding absorbed what little fire made it through. "Incoming fire neutralized," Ji-Won reported. 99.8% interception rate. "Minor shield fluctuations on decks 12 and 15. Minji nodded. Across the fleet, every human ship reported similar results. The Dominion's massive barrage had achieved essentially nothing. Not a single Terran vessel was damaged. "Admiral, permission to return fire?" Minji asked. "Granted," Doyen replied. "Show them what they're dealing with." Fire at will. The human counterattack was nothing like the Dominion's wild barrage. Each ship selected targets with surgical precision. The Indomitable's main railgun systems locked onto a Dominion cruiser. Magnetic accelerators spun up to full power, generating electromagnetic fields strong enough to accelerate metal slugs to 5% of light speed. When Ji-Won pressed the firing button, the railgun slug crossed the 800 kilometers between ships in less than a second. The Dominion cruiser's shields, designed to stop plasma and energy weapons, offered no resistance to the solid projectile. The slug punched through the shields like they weren't there, then through the hull, then out the other side, leaving a perfectly circular hole that vented atmosphere and bodies into space. The cruiser listed to one side, emergency lights flashing across its hull. It was disabled but not destroyed. The human shot had been precisely calculated to cripple, not kill. All around the Dominion fleet, similar scenes played out. Human ships fired with incredible accuracy, their weapons striking with devastating effect. Each shot disabled an enemy vessel. Each disabled ship was one less threat, one less gun firing at human ships. The Terran strategy wasn't to destroy the enemy through overwhelming firepower. It was to systematically dismantle their ability to fight. Ralvin watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart. Ships that had survived dozens of battles, vessels that had conquered entire star systems, were disabled in seconds. The humans moved through space with impossible grace, their ships dancing between incoming fire while their own weapons struck with perfect accuracy. Damage report. Ralvin shouted over the alarms. 30 ships disabled in the first minute, his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. 50 ships, 70, sir, we can't hit them. Our weapons are too slow and their defenses are too good. The Eternal Victory shuddered as a railgun slug tore through its port engine section. Ralvin was thrown from his chair as the artificial gravity fluctuated. Emergency systems kicked in, sealing bulkheads and containing the damage. But the message was clear. The humans could have destroyed his flagship. Instead, they had chosen to cripple it. 10 minutes into the battle, half of the Dominion fleet was disabled or destroyed. The remaining ships continued fighting, but it was clear they were hopelessly outmatched. The humans were faster, their weapons more powerful, their defenses impenetrable. Every advantage the Dominion thought they had meant nothing. Aboard the Indomitable, Minji watched the carnage with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that her people were proving their strength, sadness that it had come to this at all. Captain, the Dominion flagship is attempting to retreat, Ji-Wan reported. Let them, Minji replied, but disable their faster-than-light drive first. They're going to limp home and tell everyone what happened here. A railgun shot, carefully aimed, struck the Eternal Victory's engine core. The ship's FTL systems went offline, leaving it stranded on conventional engines. Throughout the Dominion fleet, human ships repeated the process. Any vessel that tried to flee had its FTL drive destroyed. 40 minutes after the battle began, it was over. 150 Dominion ships floated dead in space, their hulls breached and systems offline. The remaining 150 were crippled, their engines barely functional, their weapons destroyed. Not a single human vessel had suffered significant damage. Admiral Doyen opened a channel to the Eternal Victory. High Commander Ralvin, you were warned. Your fleet is defeated. I am allowing your surviving ships to retreat. The crippled remains of the Dominion's 6th Fleet limped through space at sublight speeds, their journey home a slow crawl of shame. Inside the damaged ships, crews worked desperately to repair critical systems while bodies of the dead were prepared for burial in space. High Commander Ralvin sat alone in his quarters aboard the Eternal Victory, staring at nothing. He had commanded fleets for 30 years, conquered a dozen star systems, and never known defeat until today. The Emperor was going to have him executed. That much was certain. No commander returned from such a catastrophic loss and kept his life. But death seemed almost preferable to the humiliation he felt. 300 ships against 40, and they had been crushed like insects. The humans had made it look easy. Light years away in the Imperial capital, Emperor Vakthar watched the battle footage for the 5th time. His throne room was empty now, all the courtiers and officials having fled when his rage first erupted. Broken furniture lay scattered across the marble floor. The Emperor's forearms trembled with fury as the recording showed his fleet being systematically destroyed. Impossible, he whispered for perhaps the 100th time. This cannot be real, but it was real. The footage came from multiple ships, showing the same devastating defeat from different angles. The humans had surrounded his fleet, weathered the Dominion's attack without a scratch, and then dismantled 300 warships in less than an hour. The precision, the technology, the sheer superiority was undeniable. Lord Krevnak entered the throne room cautiously, bowing low. Divine Emperor, the War Council requests an urgent meeting. Let them come, Vakthar said, his voice cold. We will discuss how to respond to this insult. Within the hour, the throne room filled with military commanders and government officials. Holographic displays showed star charts of Dominion space and the human border. Everyone had seen the battle footage by now. The shock was still evident on their faces. General Malkor, commander of the 2nd Fleet, spoke first. Divine Emperor, we must acknowledge the severity of this situation. The humans possess technology far beyond our current capabilities. Their weapons, their defenses, their ship performance, all of it is generations ahead of ours. So we surrender? Vakthar snapped. We bow to these primitives who hide behind their border? No, Divine Emperor. But we must be strategic. We need time to study their technology, to develop countermeasures. Attacking them again immediately would be foolish. Lord Krevenok stepped forward. With respect, General, showing weakness now would encourage every subject species to rebel. If word spreads that a mere 40 human ships defeated our 6th Fleet, the Empire will collapse from within. We must respond with overwhelming force, show the galaxy that the Dominion cannot be challenged. The Emperor nodded slowly. How many ships can we mobilize? 2,000, Krevenok replied. Every available warship from every fleet. It will take 3 weeks to assemble them. But once gathered, it will be the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like wildfire. The Dominion had tried to keep it secret, but too many ships had witnessed the defeat. Too many survivors told the story. Within days, every major civilization knew what had happened at the Terran border. Ambassador Sorahan found herself flooded with communication requests from alien governments. Species that had never spoken to humanity before suddenly wanted to establish diplomatic relations. Some were curious, some were frightened. All of them wanted to know the same thing. What were human intentions? Sora stood in her office looking at the list of pending communications. Beside her, Counselor Yuna read through intelligence reports that had come in from across the galaxy. The Dominion is mobilizing their entire military, Yuna said quietly. 2,000 ships headed our way. Sora felt her stomach drop. Can we handle that many? Admiral Doyen says yes, but the casualties would be significant. They're activating Protocol Helios, full military mobilization. Every reserve ship, every defense station, every weapon system we've built over the past 50 years is coming online. How many ships does that give us? 400, maybe 450 if we rush the final construction on some vessels that aren't quite finished. Yuna set down the report and looked at Sora. We'll still be outnumbered 5-1, but we'll have the defensive advantage. They'll be coming to us. True, and our technology is still far superior. But there's a limit to what even superior technology can do against overwhelming numbers. Yuna paused. Sora, if this escalates into a full-scale war, millions could die. Maybe billions, I know. I'll send another message to the Emperor. One last attempt at peace. Aboard Defense Station Bastion 7, Admiral Doyen met with his senior commanders to plan the defense. The holographic display showed the border region, marked with defensive positions and potential battle zones. Captain Minji stood beside him, along with General Boram Song, who commanded Terran ground forces. They'll come in the same place, Doyen said, pointing to the border sector where the first battle occurred. They'll want to prove they can beat us in the exact spot where we humiliated them. General Boram frowned. Let them come. We've been preparing for this scenario for decades. Every defense station is armed. Every ship is ready. Every soldier knows their duty. Minji studied the projections. 2,000 ships is a lot, Admiral. Even with our advantages, we'll take losses. I know. But we don't have a choice. We gave them every opportunity to walk away. They ignored the warnings. They attacked us. Now they're coming back with an even bigger fleet. Doyen's expression hardened. This time we won't show mercy. Any ship that crosses that border is a legitimate target. We destroy them all. Lieutenant Jiwan was overseeing weapons upgrades on the Indomitable when she received orders to report to the captain's ready room. She found Minji standing by the window looking out at the stars. You wanted to see me, Captain? Minji turned. Yes? I'm promoting you to Chief Weapons Officer for the fleet engagement. You'll coordinate firing solutions for all human ships in Sector 7. Jiwan felt her breath catch. That's a huge responsibility, Captain. I know. But you performed flawlessly in the last battle. Your targeting was perfect. I need that same precision when they come back. Minji's expression softened slightly. I won't lie to you, Lieutenant. This battle is going to be harder than the last one. We're going to lose ships. We're going to lose people. But we have to hold that line. We will, Captain. I promise. 3 weeks later, the Dominion Armada arrived at the Terran border. 2,000 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, stretching across space like a wall of steel. The fleet was so massive that it took 10 minutes for all the ships to complete their transition into normal space. Emperor Vakthar was aboard his personal flagship, the Infinite Glory, watching the human border through the observation screens. This time the humans weren't hiding. 400 Terran warships waited in formation, their dark hulls stark against the stars. They looked tiny compared to the Dominion fleet, but Vakthar had learned not to underestimate them. "All ships, hold position," he commanded. "Open a channel to the human fleet." The communication went through and Admiral Doyen's face appeared on the screen. The human looked tired but resolute. "Emperor Vakthar," Doyen said, "you were warned. You were shown what would happen. Turn your fleet around. This is your last chance." Vakthar leaned forward, his voice filled with cold fury. "You destroyed my 6th fleet. You humiliated the Dominion before the entire galaxy. That insult cannot stand. Today your people will learn what happens when they defy the Empire." Doyen was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, and his voice carried a weight that made even the Emperor pause. "Very well. We offered peace. We offered mercy. You have chosen war. So be it." The communication ended. Across the Terran fleet, every ship went to battle stations. Weapon systems powered up. Point defense grids activated. Pilots climbed into fighter craft, their hands steady on the controls despite the overwhelming odds. They were outnumbered 5-1, but they were defending their home. That made all the difference. Admiral Doyen stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing every ship, every weapon, every system. He took a deep breath and opened a channel to the entire Terran Defense Force. "All ships, this is Admiral Doyen. Today we face an enemy that thinks numbers will overcome skill. They think their pride is worth the lives they're about to lose. They're wrong. We are Terran Defense Force. We stand between our people and those who would harm them. We do not yield. We do not break. We hold the line no matter the cost." He paused. "All ships, weapons free. Engage at will." The Emperor raised his hand aboard the Infinite Glory. "All ships, advance. Show these humans the true might of the Dominion." 2,000 ships began moving forward, crossing the border into Terran space. The largest military force ever assembled was going to war with humanity, and humanity was ready. The space between the fleets closed with terrible inevitability. 2,000 Dominion warships advanced in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. 400 Terran vessels held their positions, waiting with cold patience. The distance shrank from 1,000 kilometers to 800, then to 500. At 300 kilometers, the Dominion fleet opened fire. It was like watching a star being born. Thousands of plasma bolts, energy beams, and missiles filled the void, turning empty space into a wall of light and death. The volume of fire was 10 times greater than what the 6th Fleet had unleashed. The Emperor had learned from the first battle. If the humans could stop a certain amount of firepower, he would simply use more. Aboard the Indomitable, Lieutenant Jiwan watched her screens light up with warnings. The point defense systems activated instantly, lasers and railguns working in perfect coordination. But this time, there was too much incoming fire for even the advanced systems to stop everything. Plasma bolts struck shields, causing them to flare brilliant blue. A missile got through the defensive screen and exploded against the hull, rocking the ship. "Shields at 80%, an officer called out. "Minor hull damage on Deck 9. Captain Minji gripped her command chair as another volley struck home. Around the fleet, other ships were taking hits too. The sheer volume of fire was overwhelming even the best defenses. Red warning markers appeared on the tactical display as 2 Terran corvettes took critical damage and began falling back. "Return fire," Minji ordered. "All weapons, maximum rate." The Terran fleet responded with devastating precision. Railgun slugs accelerated to impossible speeds, punching through Dominion shields and hulls. Directed energy weapons, kept secret until now, lanced out and vaporized enemy ships in seconds. The energy beams were weapons that used focused particles to deliver catastrophic damage, burning through armor like paper. But the Dominion had numbers. For every ship the humans destroyed, 2 more took its place. The Imperial fleet kept advancing, closing the distance, bringing more guns into range. The battle was brutal and chaotic in a way the first engagement had not been. This was not a surgical demonstration. This was total war. Admiral Doyen watched the battle unfold from Defense Station Bastion 7, his face grim. The defensive plan was working, but the cost was higher than he had hoped. 3 Terran ships had been destroyed already, their crews lost. Dozens more were damaged. The Dominion was learning and adapting, focusing fire on individual ships to overwhelm their defenses. Activate the defense stations, Doyen ordered. All of them. Throughout the border region, massive space stations that had seemed inactive suddenly came to life. Hidden weapon systems emerged from camouflaged ports. Enormous railgun batteries, each one capable of accelerating projectiles to 10% of light speed, began firing. The stations added hundreds of additional guns to the battle, turning the void into a killing field. A Dominion battleship, one of the largest vessels in their fleet, took a direct hit from a station railgun. The slug punched through the ship from bow to stern, the kinetic energy literally tearing it in half. The 2 sections spun away, venting atmosphere and debris. Emperor Vakthar watched from the infinite glory, his face twisted in rage and disbelief. His fleet was dying. Ships that had served the Empire for decades were being destroyed by dozens. The human weapons were simply too powerful, their tactics too refined. But retreat was unthinkable. He had committed everything to this attack. All ships continue advance, he commanded. Focus fire on their flagship. Kill it, and their formation will collapse. 200 Dominion ships turned their weapons toward the Indomitable. The concentrated fire was overwhelming. Minji felt her ship shudder under the assault, alarms screaming from every system. Shields failing, an officer reported. Multiple hull breaches. We're venting atmosphere on 12 decks. Route all available power to forward shields, Minji ordered. Get us some breathing room. But the Dominion ships kept firing. A plasma bolt struck the Indomitable's port engine, causing an explosion that nearly tore the section free. The ship listed to one side, emergency system struggling to compensate. Captain, we need to fall back, Jiwan said urgently. We can't take much more of this. Before Minji could respond, a new voice came through the communication system. General Boramsong commanding the defense stations. Indomitable, this is Station Bastion 3. We have your position. Adjusting fire to cover you. Hold on. 3 defense stations retargeted their weapons, focusing their fire on the Dominion ships attacking the flagship. Railgun slugs ripped through enemy vessels, giving the Indomitable a chance to retreat and repair. Minji guided her ship back, grateful for the covering fire. But the battle raged on. Both sides were taking terrible losses now. The Dominion had destroyed 30 Terran ships but had lost over 400 of their own. The mathematics of the engagement were clear. The humans would run out of ships long before the Empire did. But the price the Dominion was paying was catastrophic. In the heart of the battle, Terran fighter craft darted between capital ships like angry insects. These small vessels were piloted by humans connected to artificial intelligence systems through neural links, creating a hybrid consciousness that could react faster than any organic pilot alone. They targeted the Dominion's smaller vessels, their weapons precise and deadly. Lieutenant Minho Nam piloted his fighter through a storm of weapons fire, his mind seamlessly integrated with the ship's systems. He felt the fighter's movements as if they were his own body. A Dominion corvette appeared in his sights and he fired. The fighter's weapons were small compared to capital ship guns, but perfectly aimed shots could still cause critical damage. The corvette's engine exploded, leaving it drifting and helpless. Minho was already moving to the next target, his reactions inhumanly fast thanks to the neural link. But even the fighter pilots were taking losses. A plasma bolt caught pilot He Jin-Yu's fighter, vaporizing it instantly. Another pilot, Sergeant Taewoo Park, managed to eject before his damaged fighter exploded, his emergency beacon active as he drifted in his suit. 2 hours into the battle, both fleets were exhausted and bloodied. The Dominion had lost 800 ships, 40% of their fleet. The Terrans had lost 80 ships, 20% of theirs. Neither side was winning. It was mutual destruction. Emperor Vakthar stared at the casualty reports, his 4 hands clenched into fists. This was supposed to be a demonstration of imperial might. Instead, it was becoming the greatest military disaster in Dominion history. But he couldn't stop now. To retreat after losing so many ships would be to admit the humans were superior. Bring us forward, he ordered. The Infinite Glory will lead the next assault personally. The Emperor's flagship moved toward the front lines, its massive weapons systems charging. It was a ship designed to inspire fear, covered in ornate decorations and symbols of imperial power. But when it entered railgun range of the Terran fleet, those decorations meant nothing. 3 Terran battleships targeted the Infinite Glory simultaneously. Railgun slugs struck the ship's shields, overwhelming them through sheer kinetic force. The shields collapsed, and the next volley struck the hull directly. Armor designed to withstand conventional weapons couldn't stop the hypervelocity projectiles. The Infinite Glory shuddered as rounds punched through its structure. One slug struck near the bridge, causing an explosion that killed dozens of crew members. The Emperor was thrown from his throne, blood running from a cut on his scaled face. Divine Emperor, Lord Krevnak rushed to help him up. We must retreat. The flagship is taking critical damage. Vakthar pushed him away, rage still burning in his eyes. No, we will not retreat. We will... Another explosion cut him off as a railgun round struck the ship's main reactor. Alarms blared as radiation levels spiked. The chief engineer's voice came through the communication system, panicked. Emperor, we have a containment breach in the main reactor. If we don't shut it down immediately, the ship will explode. For the first time since the battle began, something other than rage appeared on Vakthar's face. It was fear. His flagship, the symbol of his power, was dying around him. Admiral Doyen watched the tactical display, seeing the Dominion flagship taking heavy damage. He could order his ships to finish it off, to destroy the Emperor and end this war in one stroke. But something made him hesitate. Killing the Emperor might end the battle, but it would create a power vacuum that could destabilize the entire Dominion. That instability could spread, causing conflicts that would kill billions across the galaxy. All ships, cease fire on the Imperial flagship, Doyen ordered. Let it retreat if it wants to. On the Infinite Glory, the damage control teams were fighting to save the reactor. The Emperor sat on his throne, his proud bearing finally broken. He looked at the battle display, seeing his fleet being systematically destroyed. Over 1,000 ships gone. Hundreds of thousands of crew members dead. And for what, pride? He had made a terrible mistake. The Infinite Glory drifted in space, its engines barely functional and its reactor contained but unstable. Emergency crews worked frantically to keep critical systems online, while bodies floated in corridors where hull breaches had stolen the atmosphere. Emperor Vakthar sat on his throne, staring at the tactical display with empty eyes. Around him, what remained of his mighty fleet was in chaos. Some ships continued fighting with desperate fury. Others tried to retreat, their captains finally understanding the truth that their emperor refused to accept. The humans were not going to lose this battle. The only question was how many more would die before it ended. Lord Krevnak approached the throne cautiously, his voice soft. Divine Emperor, we must order a full retreat. If we continue, the entire fleet will be destroyed. Vakthar didn't respond immediately. He simply sat there, watching red markers disappear from his display as more ships died. His grand plan to subjugate humanity had become a nightmare. Of the 2,000 ships he had brought, barely 800 remained. The humans had lost over 100 vessels, but they still had 300 functional warships. The mathematics were clear. The Dominion could not win. Send the retreat order, the Emperor finally said, his voice barely a whisper. The command went out across all frequencies. The Dominion fleet began withdrawing, ships turning away from the battle line and accelerating toward the border. But the humans weren't pursuing. They simply held their positions, weapons still active but no longer firing. They were letting the Empire flee. Admiral Doyen stood in the command center watching the enemy withdrawal. His uniform was stained with sweat and exhaustion lined his face. Around him, officers worked to coordinate damage control and search for survivors from destroyed ships. The cost of victory was written in the casualty reports scrolling across his screens. Should we pursue? General Borum asked. Doyen shook his head. No, we've made our point. Let them go home and count their dead. That will be lesson enough. Captain Minji guided the damaged Indomitable back toward Defense Station Bastion 7, her ship trailing debris and venting coolant from damaged systems. The flagship had survived, but barely. She had lost 43 crew members, good people who had died defending their home. Their names would be added to the memorial wall, joining the hundreds of others who had fallen in this battle. Lieutenant Jiwon sat at her weapons station, staring at her hands. They were steady, but she felt like she was shaking inside. She had fired the weapons that destroyed dozens of enemy ships, killing thousands of people. The tactical necessity of it didn't make the weight any lighter. Lieutenant, Minji said softly, moving to stand beside her. You did your duty. You protected your ship and your people. Don't ever forget that. Yes, Captain, Jiwan replied. But she knew the faces of the dying ships would haunt her dreams for years. The Emperor's flagship limped back to Dominion space, its journey taking weeks because the faster-than-light drives were too damaged to engage. During that long voyage, Vakthar had time to think about what had happened. His pride had led him to this disaster. His refusal to listen, to accept that the humans might be telling the truth about their capabilities, had cost thousands of lives. When the infinite glory finally reached the imperial capital, Vakthar expected to be overthrown. He expected the military commanders to demand his abdication or execution. Instead, he found the Empire in shock. News of the battle had spread throughout Dominion space, and every subject species was watching to see what would happen next. The War Council assembled, and Vakthar prepared for judgment. But General Malkor, who had warned against attacking the humans, spoke first. "Divine Emperor, we do not question your rule, but we must acknowledge reality. The humans possess military technology we cannot match. Their industrial capacity, their weapons, their defensive capabilities, all of it is beyond our current understanding. Continuing this conflict would destroy the Empire." Vakthar nodded slowly. "Then what do you propose?" "Peace. We send ambassadors to the humans. We formally recognize their borders and agree to a non-aggression treaty. We rebuild our fleet and focus on defending what we have, not expanding into territory we cannot take." It was the hardest decision the Emperor had ever made, but he knew it was the only rational choice. "Make it so. Send word to the humans. The Dominion requests peace negotiations." Ambassador Sora Han received the peace offer with relief. She had spent weeks preparing for the possibility of extended warfare, drawing up evacuation plans for border colonies, and coordinating with other human settlements. The idea that the conflict might actually end was almost too good to believe. She brought the offer to Counselor Yuna and Admiral Doyun. They met in the council chambers, reviewing the Dominion's proposed terms. "They're offering everything we asked for," Yuna said, reading through the document. "Recognition of our borders, a non-aggression pact, establishment of neutral zones. They're even offering reparations for the ships we lost. Do we trust them?" Doyun asked. Sora considered carefully. "I think we've taught them a lesson they won't forget. The Emperor lost over 1,200 ships in his attempt to conquer us. That's not something you recover from quickly, either militarily or politically. I believe they genuinely want peace now." "Then we accept," Yuna decided. "But we remain vigilant. We keep our defensive fleets at full strength. We continue developing new technologies. Peace is good, but only if we're strong enough to maintain it." 6 months later, the treaty was signed. Representatives from the Galactic Dominion and Terran Command met at a neutral space station to formalize the agreement. Emperor Vakthar did not attend personally, sending Lord Krevnak in his place. The signing was broadcast across the galaxy, showing every species that humanity's borders were now officially recognized. But the treaty was only part of humanity's response. Admiral Doyen stood before the Terran Council and presented a plan that would ensure this conflict never happened again. "We build a permanent defensive network," he explained, showing holographic displays of the proposed system. "Automated defense platforms positioned every 100 kilometers along the entire border, each one equipped with railguns, point defense systems, and sensor arrays. They'll be powered by small fusion reactors and controlled by artificial intelligence. Any unauthorized crossing will trigger an immediate response." The project took 3 years to complete. Thousands of defense platforms were constructed and deployed, creating a wall of steel around human space. Each platform was painted with a simple message in multiple languages. "Terran exclusion zone. Turn back." The galaxy learned to respect that boundary. Ships passing near human space gave the border a wide berth. The defense platforms became legendary. Stories told in bars across 100 worlds about the automated guardians that never slept and never hesitated. Admiral Doyen eventually retired, his duty complete. He had defended humanity when they needed him most, and now he could rest. Captain Minji took his place as fleet commander, continuing his work of maintaining the peace through strength. Lieutenant Jiwan, promoted to commander, served on the Indomitable for another decade before taking command of her own ship. The nightmares about the battle never fully went away, but she learned to live with them. The price of protecting what you love is sometimes carrying the weight of what you had to do. Engineer Hyun-woo continued improving human technology, always working to ensure the next generation of ships would be even more advanced than the last. General Borum trained new soldiers, teaching them the lessons learned from the war. Ambassador Sora maintained diplomatic relations with dozens of alien species, building bridges instead of walls. The Galactic Dominion never recovered its former glory. The losses from the war with humanity weakened them enough that subject species began demanding independence. Within 20 years, the Empire had fractured into a dozen smaller nations. Some remained hostile to humanity, but most eventually established peaceful relations. Other alien civilizations watched what happened and learned. Some approached humanity with offers of trade and friendship. Others kept their distance, content to leave the mysterious humans alone. A few tried to steal human technology through espionage, but Terran security was as advanced as their military. The attempts always failed. Humanity remained behind their border for another century, slowly revealing themselves to the galaxy on their own terms. When they finally began establishing colonies outside the exclusion zone, they did so carefully and peacefully. They had proven they could fight when necessary. Now they would prove they could build when given the chance. The border defense platforms continued their eternal watch, silent guardians marking the line that could not be crossed. They stood as monuments to a simple truth that the galaxy had learned the hard way. Humanity wanted peace, but they were prepared for war. They preferred isolation, but they could engage when needed. They offered mercy to those who respected their boundaries, and overwhelming force to those who did not. The story of the Terran exclusion zone became legend. Parents told it to their children as a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance. Military academies studied the battles, trying to understand how such small forces had defeated such massive fleets. Diplomats used it as an example of how to establish boundaries and enforce them.